the NS managed object context. So one of the things that I recommend, and this is sort of like what I consider the secret to learning core data, it's actually really, people make core data way more complicated than it needs to be to learn. And one of the secrets is to use, Apple has documentation called the core data snippets. So if you just search for core data snippets, you'll see that we have this document here, and it has, so accessing the core data stack, so you can find out some things about the core data stack and what it's made out of. But the main part is this part here, fetching managed objects, fetching specific property values, creating and deleting managed objects. So these two, the fetching managed objects and also creating and deleting. So let's just have a look at one of these. So you can see here that this is all in Objective-C. All those people that only know Swift will not have access to this, but that won't be you. So you can see here that in this line here, it's saying that you need a reference to context, an NS managed object context. And so you see how it has these angle brackets and the little pound sign, and it says get the context. Okay, so what does this mean? So this is the syntax that the snippets library uses in Xcode. So this is actually an Xcode snippet. So let's see, I think if we go into Xcode and we go basic, let's see, here, I have to be outside, basic fetch. Let me see if I can pull it up. Core data fetch. So you can see if we pull this out, I don't know, there's various snippets in the library. You can see this is actually Objective-C here. So it's not going to help us in this project. Anyway, that's why we got this particular syntax, in case you're wondering. So this would be a placeholder in the code where you tab between those placeholders. So it's saying that we need to get a context somehow. And then basically what we're doing is initializing an NS fetch request. And then we are creating this NS entity description. So I'll talk about this in a second. We don't actually need to do this with the entity description anymore. There's been updates to this. So we create a description with the entity name. So let's say our entity is named person. We would just put a person string in there in the managed object context. So we pass the context we got here, right? So that we say, fetch request set entity to this entity description here. And then you can see that it's creating an error variable here. And it's calling execute fetch request on the context, passing that request and passing the pointer to the error. And then obviously you would have an array of fetched objects. Okay, so they have all of the basic fetches that you need to do, like sorting and so on. So all that stuff is there. And also creating a managed object, all of the syntax for doing that is also there. All right, so I want to actually start doing a demo, but maybe we should we take like 5 minutes before we start that? Oh, sorry, was I hogging the whole thing?
You're fine.
All right, so I guess I'll close this thing out and start a brand new project. So I'm going to call this dogs, because I am going to use some dogs. I'll probably have to move that. All right, so I actually have a if you want to work along, I have a couple of little dog images, so that one and that one. So let me just drop that in the folder there. Okay. Oh, it won't do it. Okay, I have to zip it. All right, so let's go back to dogs and let's just put those. I'm just going to put a couple of those images in there. Oops. Or the dog images. So let's just make sure those are copied into the folder. So make sure copy is selected. All right. So let's go to the app delegate. So we can see that core data is imported. So I'm just going to delete some of this stuff we don't need here. So we want to. You can see that core data has a save context method. And the application will terminate. So when the app's about to terminate, it's going to call save on the context. So basically, you don't lose any data that's in the context. All right, so let's just look at some of this stuff. We don't need this. Okay, so you can see that the save context method is talking to this persistent container dot view context. So the persistent container is so this is a variable here, or it's actually a property that is marked lazy, right? And so basically, the first time you try to access this block will execute. You can see that that's what it means here, these two round braces here, that will execute this block here. So it's going to create a persistent container with the name dogs, and then it's going to load, call this load stores thing. Okay, we don't really need to worry too much about this. The persistent container, however, has a property on it called the view context, which is the NS managed object context. So these are some additions that have been added to core data. If you are looking at stuff online, you might not see this. It might predate this use of this NS persistent container. It's no big worry. It's just a container that holds like the context and other things. So you can see there's also a reference to the managed object model and the persistent store coordinator and so on, right? So what we do need, though, is we're going to need a property to the context. So let's do var here. I'm going to call this context, and this is going to be the NS managed object context, and I'm going to make that implicitly unwrapped. So what I want to do is in the launch method, I want to set context to equal the persistent container dot view context. So that's just a convenience so that I don't need to keep going through the persistent container to get to the context. Just saves me a little bit of hassle. All right, so we also have the save. You can see we have the save context method, so we don't need this line anymore. So I'll just delete that line. It's just getting a reference to the context, but we already did that. So the save method just has it's checking to see if the context has changes. So that's obviously a Boolean. So if it has changes, it's going to enter into this block here, and it will initially run this do method, and it will attempt to save. If there's, so that's a trying expression. If it fails, then it is going to go down into this error thing and just cause a crash on this line and dump out the user info on the error. So you can see that it's casting the error variable to an NS error here. So yeah, okay. So that's it. That's all that it's doing there. So what we want to do is, first of all, let's create our model. So what we do is we create the model in this visual editor. So you can see it's XC data model D. So what we can do here is there's a button down here. Well, we can sort of look around here a little bit. We can see that we have a button for adding entities. So that's like your table, and then the attributes of the table, it's pretty obvious what that is. And there's two different views, so we can look at it in terms of a tree. So if we switch between these, we can see we'll be able to see the tables. All right, so the first entity, well, I only have one entity in this, and it's going to be called dog. And I can start adding attributes. So if I can switch to this view, you can see it's looks like that. Okay, so the attribute, let's say that this is going to be name, and I can set the type here to be a string. And let's do age, and let's make this an int 16. Let's say that we're also going to have color, which is a string. And then I want to have, let's say, an image. And this one is going to be a binary data object. Okay, you can see that we can also have a date, a URI, and so on. So there's some other possibilities here. So if I set this to a binary data type, now it's SQLite, so we don't want to store our images inside of core data. So what we can do is if we can inspect the attributes on this image, and we do want this image to be optional. And you can see that this is a binary data type, and we can click allows external storage. Okay, and that will basically core data is going to manage this image for us. So what that means is it'll determine whether or not the image is too big to store in core data itself. If it is, what it will do is it will write it to the file system on a background thread for us and manage the URL. So it's just going to store the URL in SQLite for us, and it will essentially handle all that stuff for us, so we don't need to manage the image. I'm going to make these other values required. So color, let's make that required, and name is also required. Okay, so just going to select this entity, inspect it. So what you want to do here is just build this. Okay, so that will make the compiler aware of this dog object. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to do some Crud operations here on this. So Crud, so I'm going to create, I'm going to fetch. Okay, so I'm going to do like different kinds of fetches. I'll do a simple fetch, sorted, and a filtered fetch. And let's say we also want to update, and we want to delete. All right. So let's just go ahead and make some of these methods. So I'm going to actually make an extension to the app delegate just to sort my stuff, just to keep all my requests separate. So I'm going to make a private method here. So let's say private func create dogs. And I'm just going to go up and make sure that I call that method. So create dogs. And I want to make sure it's after I set that context, because I'm going to be using the context. So let's say, let's do let dog1 equals dog. And we can see that we have two methods here. We have one that takes an entity description, and we have another method that just takes the context. So this method that takes the entity description is an older way of doing it. You don't need to, you don't actually need this entity description anymore. You can just go straight for the context. So we can just pass in the context there. All right, so dog1 dot age, let's say it's 1, dog1 dot name, What's the dog's name? Spot. Thank you. Dog1 dot color. So what color is he? With white. Okay, and dog1 dot image is equal to. So let's make that image. So image 1 is going to be UI image named, and then let's see, I can't remember which one was the blonde one. Oh, it's the image 1 dog1 dot JPEG. All right, so we need to convert the image to a data object. So let's see. So how do we do that? Searching it?
Yeah.
So UI image JPEG representation. Okay, so we can just pass that image 1. So that's probably going to want that to be unwrapped. So I can just do a guard let and a return here. Sorry. So image 1, and then it wants the compression quality. I'm just going to do 1.0. All right, so that is the dog1. So let's do 3 dogs. Okay, so dog2.
In this case, we're making a choice to return if the image doesn't work, but we said the image is optional, so technically we don't have to. Is that a good?
This method wants an actual image. So you see that it's not an optional image here.
I mean, for just like the dog context, like you could still save a dog without an image.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I see what you're asking. Yeah, I will make one that doesn't save it with that does not save an image. So say Walter, and this guy's black, and we'll say that's image 2. And let's say that this is the second image because I think that is a black dog. So better make sure we change that there. Right. All right, so one more dog.
Missing a bracket. After the 1.0.
So
In the last line, you can copy the bracket, the closing brackets. Line 82.
line 82, right, thank you. Did I make that same mistake elsewhere?
Yeah, 89. Because you copied 82.
Oh, right, thank you. And what about there? I think the rest is fine, yeah. Okay, so let's just change this to dog3. And oh, I need to make sure I change this guy's age to 5. And this one will not have an image. Color, oh, it's meant this to be black. Let's say that this one is spotted. What's another dog name? What's your dog's name?
Zeke.
Zeke.
Z-E-K-E.
Z-E-K-E?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So these initializers here are going to insert into the context. So we need to save the context. So I'm just going to call that convenience method that is defined here, save context. I can also do like save. I can also say context dot save, but notice that is a throwing method, so I would have to handle that. All right, so let's run this. All right, so no crashes. Let's look at Finder. So we need to look in library, app support, and then we see that SQLite database there. So I'll open it in that tool. Okay, so we see that we have the database schema there. You see how it adds like Z to the front of it, Z underscore. So you can see this gives it a primary key and so on. So there's like entity option, there's age, color, name, and image. And you can see there's our data. So the image, or the one that does not have an image there, has null. So that's pretty much it. And you can go ahead and do, see, you can obviously write your own queries if you want to test it, but you can also see, like, this is a log of some of the stuff that Core Data has done. All right, so we have created some data, so I'm just going to comment that out. So next, let's fetch some data. So let's do private func simple fetch. All right, so if we go to NS managed object context there, and we go to, let's look for fetch. So we see that we have this fetch request. So this one here takes a type T, so we can specify what type of request, and it returns an NS fetch request result object. So let's try that. So context.fetch. I think we want, sorry. So there's this method here that takes a fetch request. There's another one that returns a fetch request result. So let's try this one. So let's create a so fetch request, and that's a fetch request, and you can see that takes an entity name there. So I don't really want to type literals here, so I'm just going to create a struct that's going to be called key. Let's call it key, and we'll make it static. Let, and then this would be entity, or I could say dog key or something. How about dog? So that's going to be the string dog. And so here I can just do key dot dog. So that's the entity name dog. Okay, so this generic, so it wants this to be, so this NSFetch request, so it's returning the results. Let's see. So let's just pass that in fetch request. So this is a throwing expression. And that is returning an any. So
Do you have to, instead of NS fetch request result, do you have to put dog?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Let's just run that. So this is returning fetch. So I think I have the wrong fetch method here. Let's see. I don't know. This. Let's just try this again. So context. So fetch request. So we have this one which returns. I think this is the one we want. Fetch request. So this is going to be a try expression. Let's build that. Yeah, so this would be dogs in this case. We'll say that it's dogs. So for dog and dogs. All All right, so let's just do a print here. So dog dot age dog dot name. Well, let's do name first. Dog dot color. So I'm just going to force unwrap that. Dog dot age. So I think that also needs to be force unwrapped. Okay, so that should just print for each one. All right, so that's our simple fetch. Let's run this. Just make sure it's called. All right, so we have our simple fetch. So let's do a fetch with a sort. So we need to add a sort descriptor. So here we do ns sort descriptor, and this can take a string and say whether it's ascending. So here what we're going to say is let's sort by age, and ascending is true. All right, so we need to add this sort descriptor. So fetch request dot sort descriptors. So that takes an array of them. So you can pass however many you want in there, and that will obviously like sort according to the first one and then the second one and so on. Like, all right, so let's run this request. So fetch with sort. All right, so we see those are in ascending order there by age. So let me do another request here with, so fetch with a filter, or we could say fetch with a predicate. So let's just change this. We don't want this sort descriptor anymore. So let's say that this is a predicate, and say ns predicate. And we're going to use this version here. So we just want, let's say that the age is greater than 5. So this should just get the one dog. So we need the, so one of the things that you can do here is if you search for snippets, you'll see core data snippets comes up there. So fetching an object, we want that's the sorted one, so we want the predicate one. So you can see that we create an NS predicate and then we set the predicate on the fetch request. So that's exactly as we did for the sort descriptor. So fetch request dot predicate is equal to the predicate that we created there. Okay, so and then we're looping through. The thing is in this case we should only really have one dog. So let's instead of this stuff, let's print the line, and then let's just get the, oh, sorry about that. Let's actually do the fetch, and then this stuff here we don't need. So let's do a dogs dot count. So that really should just be 1. So let's also let's print the name and so on of that dog. So So let's get the first dog. So let first dog equals dogs dot first. So we'll do a guard on that. All right, so we can do first dog. All right, actually this method, I would like to return that dog. Okay, so fetch with predicate. Let's make sure we're calling that method. Let's make this optional and return null. I didn't actually handle that object there, so you can see the count is 1 and Zeke is the only dog over 10. Okay, so that is using an NS predicate. Okay, so here I didn't do anything with the return value, so I can just do it like that. That will satisfy the compiler. Let's just see here. So simple and sorted. Okay, so those are all the fetches. So I just need to do update and delete. All right. So private func update dog. So what I could do here actually is I could just say update dog and pass in a dog. So let's do that. So once we have the dog, we can just say dog.age. Let's increase the age by 1. And then we can just say save context. So, well, I can just go and look at the database to make sure the age was updated. So it should be 11. So let's do a fetch on this guy here and get the Zeke. Did I spell it right?
Yep, that's spelled correctly. Does
Okay.
the capitalization matter, or?
Well, since it's an instance, I'll leave it. Yeah. Okay, so update dog and just pass in Zeke. So that's an optional, so I'm going to have to do a guard here. So this, well, this is bad, right? Because I can just return yes, actually. Return true. This. Okay, so passing that dog in there, and that should update it to 11, hopefully. Okay, let's just go and see the data, and Zeke is 11 now, so that worked. Okay, and then we just need to do a deletion. So let's comment this out. Well, I'll still use this method because I'll create deletion and pass in the dog. So func delete dog, and then this is quite easy. I just do context dot delete object and then pass in dog. Okay, so save context. So that should be good. Let's just go up here. So delete. Oops. Delete dog, and then pass in Zeke. Okay, run that. Go look at the database. And Zeke is gone there. Okay, we can actually see. Does it show the? I guess it's not showing the request in the log. Okay, so that is deletion. So I'm done with the CRUD stuff. So what I wanted to do was just show you how to add this to a simple application. Okay, so right now we just have one view controller. So what I would like is I would like to be able to add new dogs. So let's get ourselves a view controller. View controller. I'm going to just stick this inside a navigation controller. So embed in navigation controller. Okay. And this is going to be the view controller. Let me actually put UI table view. Let's just pin this thing all the way around. All right, so table view, let's just make sure that it's set up. So we need one prototype cell, and we also need to make sure the cell identifier is set to, so we're going to have to select that cell and make sure that its identifier is set. So I'll just call it cell. And then what we can do is let's just set up the data source. And the other thing is we're going to need an outlet to this guy. So we can just remove this file. Let's create a, let's call this main, oh, sorry, UI view controller. Let's call this main. And one more. Let's call this add view controller. All right, so let's go back to the storyboard quickly, and let's make sure that we're going to need an outlet to this table view, but let's set the identity to main, and then this one is going to be set to detail. So we're also going to need a button, so a UI bar button. Let's add that in there. Change this to add, and let's just control drag to this guy, the show. Okay, and the other thing is we need a bar button. We're here for, oops, so need to just do, if we just do item, we have to add an item there, and bar button. Let's just make this say button. All right, so here in this view controller, I want to be able to add a new dog. So let's put some UI text fields. So I'm just going to make 3 of them. Just grab them all, put them inside a stack view, and then I'm going to just adjust the stack view. So that's fine there. 0, 0, and then let's just make sure that this has a height. Make that 120. Okay, so these things also need constraints. So let's make this 20 over here, 20 there. Oops. It's kind of hard to see them, so I'll change the background color. Right now it's white. Let's make it like yellow or something. This thing seems a little short. Sorry, I'm fiddling around with this auto layout stuff. So let's select this guy and make sure that it's set to 20, 20, and then this guy is also set to 20. I don't know. In previous versions, you didn't have to set these. So the other thing is, like, if I grab this thing and set its fill to fill, I think it's proportional. No, I think I need this thing to be a bit taller, perhaps. The height right now is set to 120. Let's make it 200. That's better. And so let's do fill equal spacing. There we go. Don't know why it is. What is the error we're getting here? So it says it's conflicting. Conflicting constraints. So rounded style. Not sure what the problem is. Let me just see. What is this constraint? I think I know what the problem is. Let's just select these and then get rid of the constraints. So clear the constraints on those, and then let's just give them a width instead. You never used to have to do this. I don't really.
I'll have trouble with this too.
Yeah, I don't know.
You would
It used to
think that you
automatically.
would think that it wouldn't shrink like that. But
Yeah, like I guess it doesn't have a width though. That's the problem. But I want the width to be relative to the container it's in, right? So I could say, you know, for example, I guess I could say like equal widths. So that will work. So let's say equal widths. And then equal widths. Okay, that's good enough for our purposes. Okay, so I just need placeholder text. So let's say name. So let's change this to add dog. So name and age and color. All right. Let's make sure that we have the class set here to add view controller. All right, so I'm going to just get these outlets done quickly. Let's, first of all, get rid of some of this crap. We don't need any of this stuff. Okay. So this is the name text field. And this is going to be the color. All right, so we also need the save button hooked up. So save was tapped. I'm not going to use the make sure that has an action, and I don't need the I don't actually need the all right, so let's just make sure that works. The other thing we need is we just need an outlet to the table and also an action connected to the plus button. So we are going to use this prepare. We may use this prepare for segue method, so I'll just leave that. Okay, so table view. And we need to say that we are a UI. I don't think we need to declare this. Once we do the control drag, I believe we're fine. Okay, so we just are going to need the data source and delegate methods. So just also grab this action. Okay, so we can put about well, actually, we didn't need this action method, right? Because we're just segueing. I think that we connected that segue up. So I don't actually need this method. So let's just make sure we didn't break anything. That's this guy, right? Just go and inspect. And yeah, there was a broken let there, or action. All right, so save in this method. One of the things that we want to do is do navigation controller dot pop view controller animated. So we can say that this is going to be true for the animation. Okay, so that will make sure that when we hit the save button, we'll go back. Let's just run it, make sure that we're not creating any problems. Let's just comment this out. So it says dogs table view number of rows in section unrecognized selector sent instance. That's because we haven't implemented that yet. So let me just make sure that we implement the data source methods quickly. So that's in the main controller. Let's just do an extension to the main controller. And so we need number of, table view. So number, let me just declare it here, UI table view data source. So we need the required methods, so number of rows and cell for row. So we need those two. So for now, I just want to get this to compile, so I'm just going to return 10. And here I can just return, let's get rid of this. We also don't need this to be public. So we can just return UI table view cell, create an instance of it. We don't need to do anything else. Okay, so yeah, so it should compile now. Okay, and it goes there. That's fine. Save. Should pop back. Okay, so the basics are there now for the UI. All right, so first thing we want to do is load everything in this table. So let's see. I just want to use the prototype cell. So let's just select the cell style. So I think basic. The left detail. Which I'm not sure which cell style gives you an image on the left. Let me just look that up. Table view. It's easier to just look it up here. UI table view cell, and then we need the style. So if we go here, let's UI table view cell style. So there's default a simple cell style with text label and optional image view. Okay, so that is, I think that'll be good enough. So the default, let's see, the value one is value one. So label on the left, the right side. Yeah, so So I think the default one, I believe, is fine. So it has an optional image view. So let's try that one. So this way we don't need to make our own custom cell. Okay, so the thing is that I'm going to need to fetch all of my dogs. So I already had a method here in the app delegate to do that. So remember, that was the simple fetch. So what I'm going to do here is, so what should I do? Should I move all of these requests into their own object? Would that be reasonable? That would be reasonable, yeah. Okay, so I will move all of these requests into their own object. All right, so just delete this app extension and let's create a some sort of NS object subclass that is my data manager. Okay, so let's put that there, and I'm just going to paste all this stuff in here. So what I need is, obviously, I might not want these to be private, but we'll work that out in a sec. So I want a custom initializer. Why do I need a custom initializer? Why do I need a custom initializer?
Maybe just need to create one data manager object. So
Well, you can see I need to get the context here, so I better do that, right? I better do that in the initializer, is get this context. So let's do that. So let context, so this is going to be an NS managed object context. And so the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to ask the app delegate for this. Now I could, alternatively, I could, and this is probably a better way, is to create this object from the app delegate and then pass it to the root controller. Okay, so in that case, I wouldn't need to, then I could pass the context in. Okay, is everyone following this? Eric, you look confused. So, so I have this data manager, and this guy is going to be responsible for doing all the core data stuff. So I could create this object in the first view controller, in the root controller, right? I could initialize it from the first controller. And then once it's initialized, I could pass it to any children that way. Or alternatively, I could create it in the app delegate and then pass it through the app delegate. Now, the advantage of doing it that way is that when I initialize it, I already have a reference to the context from the app delegate. Okay? The app delegate has a reference to the NS managed object context, right? So if I don't initialize it in the app delegate, then that means that I must reach back to the app delegate to get the context, right? So that is kind of like reaching back to the parent to do that. So that's why that's not really a very good solution. So I think what we should do is inject it. Well, you know what? I'll leave that as an exercise to you to, well, what do you think I should do? Should I inject it from the app delegate? Yeah, okay. All right, so I need to have an initializer that is like a convenience initializer. Init. So don't want override. So this is going to pass in the context, and this will be the NS managed object context. Let's see, I should be able to remove that. I think it's going to require me to call super, I believe. Build fields. Self init. So yeah, I think it. What's the solution here? So let property context may not be initialized directly. Use self.init or self equals. So I'm not sure. Data manager has no initializers. Right. So I'm gonna have to do init here. So I think that this is going to require me to call that initializer, I believe. Self-init, is it happy with that? So does it want this to be large? Shouldn't need to. Fold. Oh, right. So save context. So this is also going to be a problem for us. So we are going to need this. We can actually just copy this method, save context, into this method here. So that's fine. Okay. Alrighty, so that's our data manager there, and we need to call this convenience initializer with our context. Okay, so we are going to do this inside here. So let's see, we need to do that right here. So the first thing that I need is a reference to the root controller. Since we're using the storyboard, so let root controller equals, so window dot root view controller, and this is going to be the main controller. So we can just do a guard on this. To unwrap it, return true. Actually, maybe I should return false from here. Okay, so that's the root controller. So then we need to go to main controller, and let's create a variable, which is going to be the data manager. So data manager. Okay, so that's going to hold that data manager instance for us. And so here we want to say root controller.data. Sorry, it's not, doesn't know about it yet. So root controller.data manager equals, and then we're going to do data manager and then context and pass it the context. Okay, so that will set the data manager and pass the data manager over to the main controller. All right, so we're going to need to do a fetch here. So we need to get the count of dogs. So we're going to ask the data manager for that. So let's open up data manager in the split view here. And what we need is, so I'm just going to leave these methods for now. So let's I guess we can just sort of say, mark. This is like, these are the old methods. We may use some of them. So I want an internal func get data count, or let's say dog count. All right, so we're going to need to do a fetch for the count. So let's just go look at the managed NS managed object context, and let's just see if there's a method for count. So there is, and it takes a fetch request. Okay, so we'll do that. So let's set up a fetch request and get the count. So let request equals NS fetch request. So with the entity name, and I think we have that struct here. So I'll just move this struct. Let's move it past the initializer. Paste it there. So we just do t dot dog. So context dot count, and then this is going to be the request. So let's see, this is probably going to be some sort of result type. This was, so hang on a sec. This fetch request. And I think that this required me to specify the type of the, did I say that was a dog like that before? Key dot dog. Is that right? So this is a, let's do a try on that. Okay, and let's see, that is going to return an int. So let's make sure that this method returns an int, and just return that result. All right, so let's go back here, and we will do data manager dog count. Okay, so that should give us the count. So right now this should be returning 2. I think we only have 2 dogs, right? So let's go ahead and just set up this cell. So we're going to need a dog at index path. So let's do a method like internal func dog at index path. And this is going to be an NS index path. Okay, so this is going to return a dog object. So let me just return dog. I'm just going to do it like that just to quiet the compiler for a sec. So we're going to do let dog equals data manager dot dog. Oops. Let's build it. Dog at index path, and just pass it the index path there. Okay, so that should give us the dog, and then we need to create a cell here. So what is this? Is that an optional option? Oh, I see. It's the, so it shouldn't be an NS index path, it should be index path. Sorry about that. Okay, so that's good. So that's going to return a dog, so we need a cell, right? So let cell equal UI Tableview cell, and then we want it to be, the style I think is going to be the default style, and then the reuse identifier was cell. So cell dot image view dot image is equal to dog dot image, and then let's see, cell dot text label dot text is equal to dog dot name. So, and then we can just go ahead and return the cell. Spell that for a sec. So, right, so image is an NS data, so we need to convert that. So let's say, first of all, we need to see if there is an image. So if let image equals dog image, then let's see, this needs to be a UI image. So var dog image is going to be a UI image optional. So we can just assign this to dog image. So if there is no image, it's not going to go into this. If there is an image, then we need to go ahead and set dog image equal to, so this is an NS data, so we need to make a UI image with data. So pick this guy, and then let's just change this to data. To data. Okay. Okay, so that looks good. So right now we're just returning this dummy dog here, so we need to go ahead and do this fetch request. So let request. So here we need to do actually a fetch that is sorted fetch. So because we need some sort of coherent order. So let's say that we let's sort by age. So this is the sorted request here. Okay, so let's return this as an array of dog objects. And let's move this method up. Okay, so that's going to return the dog instances. We don't need to loop through them or anything. So I'll just return dogs. So that's this guy. So this is just doing the request. It's doing a forced try on that fetch request there. Okay, and that should return the dog. So I can go ahead and use this method, and it's going to sort by the age on the dog. So let's yeah, so that's fine. So let's do dogs is equal to fetch with sort. And then what I want is I want to return dogs, and then I want index path dot row. So that's going to return that specific dog at that index path that I'm passing from this Tableview self or row method. So I think I'm good. I called the data method right here. So maybe what I can do is just move this cell creation just above it, just to keep things a little bit more organized, and say that this stuff is so fetch data is going to be this method, and then this is display data. Okay. Now the thing is that this is, so let's just run it and see what's going on. Okay, so I'm crashing on this method. Unexpectedly found null while unwrapping an optional. Let me see. So this is probably data manager that's optional here. So data manager has not been set correctly. So any ideas why? I know why. So it's because we in the app delegate we said that the root controller was the main controller, but that's not true, right? The root controller is a UI navigation controller. And then what we can do is we'll say that this is nav, and then we'll say that let root controller equals nav dot. Sorry, it doesn't know about nav. Build. So nav dot root view controller. Or sorry, I think it's top view controller. And this one is as main view controller. Build. Okay. All right, so we have Spot and Walter showing up, and we just have to add our dogs over here. So let's do this quickly. So so this is going to be the name text field dot text, and let age equals age text field dot text, and let color equals color text field dot text. And so now we need to create this dog object. So we're gonna need to, so what do we need to do here to create a dog here? So this is the add view controller. What would you do in this situation?
Make a struct. Make a struct.
Well, we have a, so we have this model object, right? That is a dog. So we already have a model object.
You could get that from the context, but I think you have that method is somewhere in the data manager.
Yeah, so I do have a data manager, right? That's handling all the data requests. So somehow I want to talk to that data manager so that it's the one that's doing all this stuff. So how do I do that?
You might have to like pass it in
Yeah.
from the previous view controller.
That's right, yes. So I want to pass in a data manager. So let's do a var data manager. So that's going to be implicitly unwrapped. And then what I need to do is pass it in here. So right now I only have one segue, so I'm not really going to worry about checking for, I'm not going to check for the identity of that thing because I haven't set one and I only have one. So I'm just going to assume that segue.destination. So this is going to be as add view controller. So I'll do a var, or I'll do a flat here. A flat add vc equals, and then add vc dot data manager. Doesn't know about it yet. Let's build it. So add vc dot data manager equals data manager. So that takes care of that problem. Okay. So just go back here. It's giving me these warnings. So now I need to obviously create a method on the data manager. So let's go to the data manager and let's set, so I have a fetch, so I have this fetch dog at index path. So I'll just add it under here. So all the ones that are marked internal are being accessed from outside the method. And these old methods here, I haven't been using them, but obviously I can probably use this method right here, right? This create method. So I'll use something like this method. So create dog, let's say that it's with name, so that's going to be a string, age, and that's going to be, I guess I'll make that an int, and then color is going to be a string. Okay, so that's a void method. And what I can do here is just copy this stuff. So let dog equals dog, and then I need to create it with the context. So I have a context. Okay, and then I can just do all of this stuff. So dog age is, so this is just going to be age, and this is going to be name, and this is just going to be color. Okay. Right, so it wants this to be an int 32, so I think I might have to pass it into, let's see, I think int, what did it say? Int 8, was it?
16.
So pass that in there. Okay, so also then I need to just call save context on that. Okay, so all these old methods I'm not going to use. This is going to be called from the add view controller. Alrighty, so let's do it. So the data manager dot what did I say? What did I call it? Dog, something dog. I don't think it's showing up yet. Dot, create dog. There we are. So with so that's the name. But these all need to be unwrapped. So I can just do a guard let. And then I don't need a let here. Oops. Shit. Oh, sorry, I do need a let. My apologies. So just do like this, and then we can just do else, and then just return from this expression if there's nothing. So we just need age. That currently is a string, so I have to say int. So I actually have to convert this thing. So let me do it as part of these expressions here. So let age int equals, and then I can just do. Actually, I could probably do an int 16 and pass. Was it int 16 or 32? Can't remember. 16. So let's pass in age. Let's see if that works. Okay, so I'll change the type of that to age int, and then color is going to be color. So I'll just go ahead and change the type on this create method. Data manager, and let's just change the type of this to int 16, and then I can get rid of this line and just pass in the age directly. Let's build that. Let's see if it works. Okay, so color, and so data manager is going, and then it's going to pop. So just a quick question: will this show in the main controller if I save a new dog? No, it won't. Why is that?
You need to reload the data.
That's right. So I'm going to need to reload the data, and where do I do that from? View old here, thank you. So I can get rid of view did load. It's not being used. So view will appear animated, and we have to call view will appear animated. Okay, and we just have to do self.tableview reload data. Alrighty. Well, let's run this. Okay, so we'll add, let's add Zeke back. And let's say that was he's like 1 year old or something. And he's what color?
Black and pink.
So we see Zeke is there. So you can see that when the image view, this is probably not what you want. Like if you don't have an image, it just sticks it over there. Okay, so that is how to add core data to an actual project. Like obviously, here you don't really see, so if you see inside this main controller, you don't really see any core data requests being made here, right? So it's all being done inside this data manager object. So you could also make the data manager the delegate or the data source and handle those methods directly in there, so that rather than making the controller the data source, you can just make this data manager the data source. Very simple. And then that way we don't have to make these calls into that. Actually, these data source methods would be entirely in the data manager. It's kind of like your call. I mean, this is involving some view logic here. So you can see that the view and the data are being brought together in this method. So any questions? Do you find this confusing?
I need to review it.
Yeah. Will, did you find it confusing?
I think it's less confusing than the FMDB stuff.
Oh, okay. Less confusing than FMDB. Good. What about you?
I feel like even though I did some of this stuff, I've forgotten all of it, so it was, I have to review it again.
So it's good review?
Yeah.
I think the main thing that I find confusing is things related to the context. That just seems a little bit foreign to me. I just need to maybe look at an outside resource to, and maybe just go through this again. I mean, it makes sense when you're going through it, but I know that I'm going to get tripped up.
So essentially what we're doing is inserting, deleting, updating the context, and then we save it. So when we're like initializing, so when we call this initializer here in the data manager, when we call this initializer here, and when we're doing an initialization with the context, it's essentially inserting this object into the context. So if we didn't call save on the context, then the data would still be in the context, but not saved. So it would just mark it as like a change to the context, but it would not persist. So if I exited the app and didn't save the context before exiting the app, then this data would not be saved. I mean, that's why in the app delegate here, they have this save context in the application will terminate method. So just before it terminates, if there's any changes to the context, it'll make sure it saves those changes before exiting. So you can kind of think of the context as like I'm trying to think of an analogy, maybe like a loading dock, in a warehouse.
Right.
So if someone orders something in a warehouse, you don't just carry each item out to their car individually. Like let's say they order 1,000 items. So then I go get item 1 and I carry it out to their car. I go get item 2, I carry it out to their car. That's not how it's done, right? I move everything onto a skid or something and then move that skid to the loading dock. And that's kind of like the context. It kind of like we do all this stuff in the context, and then when we hit save, then that talks to whatever is the data store. So in this case, SQLite.
Okay.
So it's kind of like allows us to batch things and be more efficient.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was at one point you had sort of a placeholder where you initialized dog without the context, just to be able to return something while you were figuring
Yes.
the rest of the app out. So that seems like a good trait, and it lets you do that even though like some of the properties you set as required, like you can still do that.
Oh, right. Yeah, those properties are required. I mean, if I guess all those properties though are like that's not saving. I didn't try to save an object like that to the context. If I had tried to save an object where I just initialized it without context, well, it would fail, right? Because it's not been inserted into the context.
But there's still that.
But there is a
that
method for
initializer
inserting
that-
objects into the context, so I could have tried to insert it into the context. And then if I tried to save it, it would throw an error, right? Because it would mean that some of the values on it are have not been set, and so it would throw an error
So
saying
maybe
that.
you could technically do like a two-step process, like initialize the dog and then set it, just a dummy dog, set its properties, and then insert
And then
into the
insert it
context.
into the context. Yeah. So I think that if we look at NSManage object context, and we see that insert NSManage object, right? So I could insert this object into the context. So that is definitely an option. Usually it's not what you want to do, but
So that required thing happens. It's not something that I think I was having that issue too. That it doesn't necessarily translate to optional, non-optional properties in the dog class itself, but it's more when you're trying to on the saving end that it reinforces those things.
yes. Well, the thing is that I think that the dog object, these attributes of the dog that came back, I think the age was, I don't know, it seemed, I think they're optionals, right, when I go to access them. So if I say dog dot name or whatever, that comes back as an optional, right? So I think that came up in this method right here. So you can see that I'm getting the data or getting the image, but here, so let's look. So that is actually coming back to us as an optional. See? So that's the name property. And we know that the image property for sure is an optional because we said it was an optional. But so it seems like the data store here, like where I said the name was required. So if I look at the attribute on it, you can see that it was marked as non-optional, right? But so I think that this is something that's happening at the Objective-C level, where even though it's marked as an optional, Objective-C isn't marking it as non-nullable, so it is nullable. So that's the reason why it's coming back as an optional to us. Whereas the primitive type, so under the hood, this is being handled by Objective-C as a primitive type. So it's not an object, therefore it is not nullable. And so that's why when we get the age back, even though on the Swift side, we're seeing it as an object, it looks like an object, right? It acts like an object. But under the hood, Objective-C thinks it's a primitive value. That's why we're getting it back as a non-optional. So when we tried to access age, like so if we go back into the main view controller here, and if we try to say like dog.age, you can see that is not an optional because Objective-C is handling it as a primitive value. So it's like core data is all, in Objective-C, and that some of it I think hasn't been converted over to, like, that's why we're accessing the context with NSManage object context. Obviously that hasn't been Swiftified yet, that part of the API. So
Okay, yeah, I didn't realize that distinction between primitives and objects, so that's